He made America laugh every week, but just minutes before walking on stage, Frank Sutton dropped dead in his dressing room. What really killed him? And why was the truth buried for so long? This isn't just a sad ending, it's a warning, one that might hit closer to home than you expect. Frank Sutton was a national treasure, the loud, no-nonsense sergeant who terrorized Gomer Pyle with military bark and secret affection. But behind that booming voice was a man suffering silently. Today we're pulling back the curtain on a mystery that haunted fans for decades. Was it just a sudden heart attack? Or was there more going on behind the scenes? Imagine this. You're a kid growing up in the middle of the Great Depression. You have no money, no future, no safety net. Just one obsession, becoming an actor. That was Frank Sutton. Born in a small town in Tennessee in 1923, Frank wasn't supposed to make it. He didn't come from fame. He didn't come from money. He came from nothing but grit. While other kids were dreaming of steady jobs or just surviving another winter, Frank was sneaking into theaters, memorizing lines, performing in dusty school gyms in front of half-asleep classmates. Anything to chase that high you get from performing. And get this, he never lost that hunger. Not even after the bombs fell at Pearl Harbor. Not even after the studios told him he didn't look like a star. He didn't care. He wasn't trying to be Hollywood's pretty boy. He was trying to be great. He got into Columbia University, Columbia, and graduated with a drama degree. That's right, a working-class Southern kid from Tennessee made it into an Ivy League school in New York City just to study acting. Not law, not business, acting. Because for Frank, this wasn't just a career, it was a calling, and he would chase it until it broke him. If you're already hooked by Frank's story, hit that like button so more people can discover the man behind the uniform. Here's something they don't teach in film school. Before he ever played a tough guy on screen, Frank Sutton was the real deal. After Pearl Harbor, like so many young Americans, Frank ran to enlist in the U.S. Marine Corps, ready to serve, but they rejected him. Why? He was colorblind. Colorblind. One detail in his vision and boom, dream crushed. But did he quit? Hell no. Instead, he joined the Army, where they didn't care about his color vision. They cared if he could survive combat. And survive he did. Frank Sutton became part of the 293rd Joint Assault Signal Company. A name that sounds freeing until you realize what it meant. He fought through 14 brutal assault landings in the Pacific Theater, including the deadly invasions of Luzon and Leyte in the Philippines. But that wasn't a tour, that was war up close. You want to know where Sergeant Carter's fire came from in Gomer Pyle? It wasn't acting, it was trauma, it was memory, it was real life blood and sand turned into performance. He rose to the rank of sergeant, just like the character that made him famous. But the world didn't see what those stripes cost him. Because here's the truth. Frank didn't just survive war. War rewired him. The intensity, the pressure, the yelling, the discipline, the emotional shutoff. He brought all of that home with him, and later to the screen, and it made him magnetic to watch. But it also started a quiet war inside him, one nobody would notice until it was too late. By the time Frank Sutton came back from the war, most of his fellow soldiers were trying to disappear into normal life. 9-to-5 jobs, a house, a family. But Frank? He wanted the spotlight. And he didn't care how hard he had to fight for it. Hollywood didn't welcome him with open arms. He wasn't tall, he wasn't handsome in the leading man kind of way. He had a squared off jaw, intense eyes, and that unmistakable voice, the kind that sounds like it was carved out of gravel and fire. In a world full of Cary Grants and James Deans, Frank Sutton looked more like the guy who'd knock on your door to collect rent you forgot to pay. But that made him different. And different, if you play it right, is dangerous. He took any job he could get. Stage roles, live readings, low-budget TV appearances. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing credibility. And then, in 1955, something clicked. Frank landed a supporting role in a small film called Marty. No one expected much from it, just another kitchen sink drama about a lonely butcher from the Bronx. Except Marty exploded. It won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Screenplay at the Oscars. And even though Frank wasn't the star, his presence in that movie left a mark. Critics started noticing him. Casting agents remembered his face. And just like that, the guy who looked too rough for Hollywood had suddenly become the guy who made everything feel real. But even after Marty, Sutton didn't skyrocket to fame. He kept grinding, kept showing up. He was building a reputation, the kind that lasts, and when the next opportunity came, he would be ready. Let's be honest, Gomer Pyle, USMC should have been a forgettable sitcom spin-off. A country bumpkin joins the Marines. That's the whole pitch. But when Frank Sutton walked into that role as Sergeant Vince Carter, something clicked. It wasn't just funny, it was explosive. Here was this wild contrast. Gomer, the innocent goofball played by Jim Nabors, all golly and wide-eyed smiles. And Sergeant Carter, a human bulldozer. Frank played him like a ticking time bomb with a heart buried under 5 layers of barbed wire. He screamed, he barked, he stomped across the screen like a man on the edge of a breakdown. And somehow, we loved him for it. You want to know why? Because Frank wasn't acting. That drill sergeant energy, it was real. It came from his military past, from years of swallowing trauma, from bottling up every emotion he wasn't allowed to show as a soldier, a father, a man, and for 5 straight seasons, he poured all of it into that role. The chemistry between Sutton and Nabors was electric, like watching oil and water somehow form fire. They weren't just acting scenes, they were dueling souls. Every episode felt like a boxing match, between chaos and control, innocence and rage, love and frustration. The show became a smash hit. Millions tuned in. Sergeant Carter's voice became part of American culture. That booming Pyle shout became a comedy legend. But behind the scenes, Frank Sutton was starting to crumble. Because here's what no one knew. Playing that angry, explosive character was draining the life out of him. It took more than energy. It took parts of his soul. And when the cameras stopped rolling, Frank didn't get to rest. He kept going. More guest roles, more performances, more pressure to prove he wasn't just that angry guy on TV. And just like that, the role that made him famous was also quietly eating him alive. After Gomer Pyle, USMC ended in 1969, Frank Sutton had 2 choices: fade into the background like so many sitcom stars, or prove that he was so much more than a screaming sergeant. He chose the second, and that's when things started to unravel. To the outside world, Frank looked unstoppable. Guest appearances on The Twilight Zone, Gunsmoke, Love, American Style. He was everywhere. People assumed he was thriving. But in reality, Frank was trapped inside his own success. He couldn't shake Sergeant Carter. Producers wanted that same gruff voice, that same explosive energy, that same military edge. It was like he became a caricature of his own trauma. So Frank did what a lot of broken geniuses do. He took the pain and turned it into work. He threw himself into live theater, especially dinner theater, which was exploding in the 70s. Most TV stars saw it as a step down. But for Frank, it was a lifeline. The stage gave him something the cameras never could: control, freedom, intimacy, no network notes, no laugh tracks, just raw connection. But there was a cost. You see, dinner theater isn't glamorous, it's grueling. You travel constantly. You're performing night after night in small towns, hotel ballrooms, anywhere with a spotlight and a stage. And Frank wasn't 30 anymore. He was pushing theory, running himself into the ground. His schedule was brutal. No breaks, no rest, no time to heal. People close to him noticed he was always tired. He brushed it off. Chest pains, just heartburn, shortness of breath, allergies, fatigue, just part of the grind. But deep down, Frank knew something was wrong, and still, he kept going because the show had to go on, and because if he stopped even for a second, he was terrified the world would forget him. What do you think? Was fame a blessing or a curse for Frank Sutton? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. Here's the part no one ever saw. Behind the booming voice, behind the barking orders, Frank Sutton was a soft, deeply loving man. He married Toby Eigler, a brilliant writer who carved out her own path in television, especially in soap operas. They were partners in every sense, creatively, emotionally, intellectually, and together they built a family that Frank loved more than anything in this world. He wasn't just a father, he was a real father, present, protective, proud. His son, Joe Sutton, would grow up to become a successful playwright. His work praised for its emotional intensity and moral complexity. No surprise there. He grew up watching a man who lived with intensity, but loved with quiet depth. Frank wasn't just playing roles, he was setting an example. But here's the heartbreaking twist. While he was lifting everyone else up, Frank was crumbling inside. And the saddest part? He never said a word. Not to his wife, not to his kids, not to his friends. Because in his mind, showing weakness, especially as a man, a veteran, and a provider, wasn't an option, so he buried it. The stress, the chest pain, the fear, all of it locked behind that steely persona America loved so much. And it worked. To the outside world, he was still the same Sergeant Carter, tough, commanding, unstoppable. But on the inside, he was a ticking time bomb, and nobody knew just how close he was to detonating. Frank Sutton gave us laughter, power, and unforgettable performances, but in the end, his biggest role was the one he kept hidden. Let his story be a reminder. Checking in on your health isn't weakness, it's courage. And if this video moved you, share it. Someone you know might need this wake-up call more than you think.